Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back to class. This is your American literature class, and in this we have done a variety of genres. So far the genres that we have covered are essay, and I'll remind you that we started off this module with Emerson's essay on self-reliance. Then we've also done a couple of short stories, and we did one chapter from the novel The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Currently we're doing poetry, and when we started the poetry section I told you that we'd be covering a number of representative poets. We are nearing the end of the poetry section, and with this we're going to go on to one more short story, and then we're going to be doing a play. So in order to continue with the poetry portion, I need to recap what we did in the last lesson, because what we are doing today is a continuation of what we did in the last class, and that is T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I'm sure you all remember the background that I gave you to the poem, but just to revise and to go over it again, and so that you recall easily and with facility. This poem has been written by T.S. Eliot, and this is supposed to be one of his representative poems. The Wasteland and Four Quartets are other poems that are very representative. T.S. Eliot wrote at a time when there was a lot of confusion and uncertainty in the minds of Americans, and so his poems are representative of the concerns and issues of the day. The poem that we are currently doing, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, shows the confusion and uncertainty in the mind of the protagonist or the central character, that is J. Alfred Prufrock. Prufrock is a middle-aged man, and Eliot has painted his character beautifully, because he shows you various aspects of Prufrock's character. This is also one of the favorite poems of critics, because it shows so clearly the mind of modern man. The section that we did prior to what we're going to do today shows Prufrock moving in society where appearances are more important than reality, so that he mentions again and again these two lines: in the room women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Now these two lines are very representative of the society women who wanted to be known as intellectuals, and therefore they talked about art, and in particular about the artist Michelangelo, who you know was a sculptor, painter, and so many other things. So the women who are talking about Michelangelo actually do not have any idea of what Michelangelo's art was like. They're not art critics. They are not even of the intellectual level where they can truly appreciate Michelangelo's art. But because they want to be known as intellectuals, and because appearances are of primary importance in this time, therefore they mention the name Michelangelo, and they are like, you know, society ladies who want to be known as having a high intellectual level or intellectual caliber, but actually have no interest in this whatsoever. So those two lines are very representative of Prufrock, because these are society ladies. These are ladies who have not studied or who have not actually seen Michelangelo's art, but because they want to be known as intellectuals, so they drop his name every now and then. Then he also shows us the weather outside. When Prufrock steps outside the building, he sees fog. Now the fog in Prufrock is very symbolic. It's an image of confusion. It's an image of uncertainty, because when there is fog, you know, the outlines of objects appear blurred. You can't see properly. So the time at which Eliot was writing, there was a lot of confusion and uncertainty in the minds of Americans because of the world wars, because of the conditions of American soldiers when they were sent back, because of the number of casualties. This uncertainty, this chaos and confusion is depicted by T.S. Eliot and other poets and writers of the age. Now mind you, there is no moralizing here, there is no instruction. Eliot and his contemporaries are just presenting the situation as it is. Eliot, particularly in Prufrock, does not tell us what to do and what not to do. He explains the situation on ground, and he leaves it to us to see if there's anything that can be done about the situation, and if there's anything that we want to do about it. Otherwise, he does not give us any lessons at all. He doesn't tell us that this is bad and that therefore you should not do this and you should do that. He doesn't say that at all. So let's continue with Prufrock and see what more Eliot has in store for us. Okay? Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. So status quo is what is advised. Do not ruffle the waters. Do not try to change the situation. Whether it is for good or for bad is immaterial. The question that arises in the mind of Prufrock is, do I dare disturb the universe? Now this is also representative of Prufrock's idea of himself, that whatever he does matters, whatever he says matters. Normally we say that individuals do not matter, but groups do. Here Eliot is focusing on the philosophy of existence. Because I am, I matter, and I matter because I am. So when he says, do I dare disturb the universe, he's throwing out the question to his readers at large. Since the status quo is a situation in which there's a lot of uncertainty. So when he says that in a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse, whatever is being stated, whatever is being done is liable to change. This situation cannot remain this way. So whatever decisions we make, within a minute we are willing to revise that. Now this is also representative of the changing situation of the times. Because of that uncertainty, because of the wars, there was a lot of confusion. As that confusion that Eliot is referring to here. For I have known them all already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the buttons of my days and ways? Okay, let's go back a bit. So he says, I have known them all already. Now remember, he's been talking about women and how their arms appear to be bare and very beautiful, but when there is strong light that shines on them, you can see the hair. In other words, what he is talking about is no matter how much you may try to hide, the truth will be revealed. So, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, the eyes that pass judgment on you, that label you as good or evil. And then he takes this formulated phrase further, and he says, when I am formulated, when judgment is passed on me, I am like an insect that is under a microscope. He says, when I am sprawling on a pin, pinned and wriggling on the wall, you know, that is how you study an insect. You pin an insect either to the wall or to the board or a slide, and then you examine it under a microscope. So he says, I cannot move, I cannot act on my own, I cannot think about myself or my situation, because all the time people are passing judgment on me. People are watching me, observing me very closely. So when this situation persists, how can I live a life? As he says, how can I spit out all the butt ends of my days and nights and ways? So according to him, when he is being examined so closely, he cannot really do anything. He can't move freely. He can't decide anything for himself. And so how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight, downed with light brown hair. So this is what he is referring to when he says that in some light, you can see very clearly, in other light you cannot. So when you see something from very close up, you can see the shortcomings, the weak points. But when you look at an object or a person from a distance, then you cannot see the finer points. Then you cannot see the hair on the arms. When you look at it from a distance, it appears beautiful, it appears bare. But when you see it close to, then you realize the weaknesses and the shortcomings. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl? And should I then presume? And how should I begin? So, confusion in the mind of Prufrock. His attention is being diverted perhaps by a perfume that a woman is wearing, perhaps by the external physical beauty of a woman. He talks about arms that are braceleted and bare, arms that lie along a table. So some part of the body, some object is attractive to him, others are not. So when he says, should I then presume? Should he, if a woman's arms are lying in that defenseless posture on the table, should he presume that the woman wants his attention? Remember, he's already talked about his hair becoming thin. And he's already talked about this bald spot in the middle of his hair, which he's very conscious about and which he does not want women to see, because he wants to appear attractive. He's well dressed and he's taken special care to dress properly. So since he's taken proper care to dress, he wants to know if he's attractive enough and if the women are sort of passing hints to him or showing him that they are available. So a lot of attraction, a lot of fascination with beauty Eliot shows here. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watch the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. So what is it that he should talk about to this woman? Should he talk about reality? Should he present the world as it is? Or should he talk about something abstract, something that they would not know about? And of the things that he does know about, Eliot focuses particularly on the loneliness of man. And Prufrock, when he says, shall I talk to the woman about these men that I have seen who are leaning out of windows, trying to join in the movement that is taking place, trying to participate in the action that is taking place, but in which no one includes them. So they are lonely, they smoke because they want to drown their sorrows. So he says, are these the men that I should talk about? Or will this be a very hard subject for the women? Remember, the women do not have that intellectual caliber in Eliot's Prufrock. They are rather superficial society women who are always wanting to party and not really the kind who would be able to sustain an intelligent conversation. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. So he refers to crabs. You know, a crab lives at the bottom of the sea. A crab lives in darkness. And a crab, unlike other creatures, scuttles, walks sideways. It doesn't walk forwards. It has this sort of different movement in which it moves sideways. So he says, I should have been a crab, I should hide myself. I'm middle-aged, I'm not attractive, although I take a lot of care dressing up. Yet I am not attractive enough to women. So should I then be a crab? Should I not try to talk to these women at all? And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully. So confusion in his mind. On the one hand, he's talking about these women, and then on the other hand, he starts talking about the evening, where he says, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after cakes and tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? So the afternoon, the evening passes very peacefully because you think that, this is siesta time, this is nap time, and everybody should rest after lunch. And so it appears as if the afternoon and the evening are very peaceful. But, and there's a big but, Eliot says, it might not be peace and calm. It might be the silence before the storm. As he says, it malingers. You know what malingering is? When you pretend to be ill and you want to make excuses, you malinger. You make excuses and you say, oh, I'm not well today, and therefore I can't do that. So the afternoon has been given human characteristics, human features. It's at one time he says the afternoon is sleeping, lying here beside me, giving you the idea that it's like an animal, like a pet animal that you love and that is lying beside you. And then because Eliot cannot say anything positive, the moment he starts to give these features to afternoon and evening, he just sort of wakes up with a jerk and he says, maybe this is a fraud, maybe this is deceptive, and reality is very different. So should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? Because this situation is very uncertain, he says, maybe I should try to do something concrete after I've had tea. And again, this is a reference to the habit of taking tea in the afternoon that was practiced by the aristocracy. You know, they would have people coming over after lunch, and so they would have to be served tea and cakes, and as he says, ices. So should he, after he has had his full, start talking about the problems of the world? You know, some of these, let's say, organizations where people work and they say, we're working on poverty alleviation, and the people who are discussing poverty alleviation are themselves very rich, and so they'll be dressed up in very expensive clothes, and they'll have big cars, they'll have all kinds of expensive gadgets, and then they sit down and they say, you know, we're going to talk about poverty alleviation, and we are going to open up a school for poor children for orphan, and we feel very strongly about it. And then they will sit in their cars and drive off. So you get the feeling that this is all one big fraud. So he says, should I actually outline the situation as it is, or just talk about it and then forget everything? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet. And here, of course, Eliot is referring to John the Baptist and the story of Salome. Salome, you know, was a dancer, and when Herodias, who was very happy with his stepdaughter's dance, said, you know, you have danced so beautifully, you can ask me for anything and I'll give it to you. And she says, I want the head of John the Baptist. And so Herodias has no option because he has promised it. So he has John the Baptist killed, and his head is brought in upon a platter. So because John the Baptist was a prophet who prophesied the arrival of Christ, so he is held in high regard by Christians. So when Prufrock says that I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, I have been a very religious and you know, pure and honest man. I have been a prophet. So he is actually bringing in all the positive characteristics of human beings into his own person. And he says, you know, I am representative of John the Baptist. I am representative of people who have wept and prayed and fasted and have had to sacrifice my life for it. Yet, he says, I am no prophet. So this line is very important. I am no prophet. And here's no great matter. So whatever I'm doing is not something that is wonderful. It's not as if I were actually John the Baptist. I am just a representative of all Christianity, of all humanity. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. So it's not just that he has been to parties and he has enjoyed his life. He says that I have seen the eternal footmen hold my coat and snicker. You know, footmen were these servants when you entered the house for a party. Because the climate was very cold, you would be wearing a coat, so they'd take your coat and put it somewhere else, because the houses would be very warm. So he says that the eternal footman is the angel of death. The eternal footman is always the angel of death. And he says that the angel of death is waiting for me because I'm middle-aged, because I have a bald spot in the middle of my hair. I am close to dying. So I have been popular, I have been famous, I have been renowned, but I also know that I am not very far from death because I'm already in my middle age. And in short, I was afraid. So whoever has a chance, an opportunity to do good, goes and does it. And yet, even when you are doing good, you are afraid, because the angel of death is someone of whom all human beings are afraid. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question? Okay, let's go back a bit. So Prufrock is afraid. Prufrock is afraid because he's no longer young. Prufrock is afraid because he thinks he's close to death. And because he says, I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. Although I have been given opportunities, yet I know that I am not very far from death. And he says, would it have been worthwhile, after we've had the tea and consumed all the biscuits and the cakes and the ices, and eaten off very expensive porcelain, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile? Now, there are certain things that you can talk about easily. There are certain other things that you feel uncomfortable about, because you know that it's going to either bring sorrow to the listener, or it's going to upset the listeners in some other way. So he says that I cannot decide whether I should show my true self or pretend to know more than I do. So would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile? Would it have been worthwhile if I had not tried to embarrass other people, if I had not made a fool of myself, to have squeezed the universe into a ball? Some people are very fond of talking, and not just fond of talking, but asserting their opinions with such confidence that nobody else makes any difference, nobody else matters to these people. So he says, would it have been worthwhile if I had squeezed the universe into a ball and rolled it towards an overwhelming question? And the overwhelming question would be something that's very important, what they call a $1 million question. Would it have been worthwhile to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all? Okay, now let's go back. So he says, would it have been worthwhile if I had claimed to be Lazarus, who died, and Christ raised him or brought him back to life again? Now, when somebody comes back to life again, you are able to tell people of what they should do and what they should not do. So he says, should I claim to be Lazarus? Because Lazarus is famous in history. So he wants to be famous. He wants to be known by people. So should he claim to be Lazarus and have seen Christ? That would give him a lot of importance. So the one thing that he wants is the attention of all people focused in his person. If one settling a pillow by her head should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. So there's a lot of uncertainty in Prufrock, not just in the poem but also in the mind of Prufrock, the character. And he says, supposing I try to focus attention on myself by doing various odd jobs, supposing I'm trying to help a person who's not feeling well, it might be taken as interference. It might be that the person I'm trying to help says, this is not what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. So uncertainty, chaos and confusion. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? So the repetition of the question, would it have been worthwhile, the repetition of in the room women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, the repetition of decisions and revisions, this is something, this is a technique that Eliot uses in order to reinforce his ideas, in order to ensure that people think the way he does. So he says, would it have been worthwhile if after having tea and after having sat with the aristocrats to talk about serious things? Because the company that he's moving in now is not the kind where you can discuss serious issues. You can talk about clothes, the opera, the theater, you can talk about dancing and singing, but you cannot think about the really serious issues, the issues that matter in the world. It is impossible to say just what I mean. So he, comes to some sort of a conclusion where he says that I can't really say what I mean because a lot of people would get upset at that. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all? So chaos and confusion, uncertainty that Prufrock wants to show, and this is sort of compounded in the next few lines. He says, no, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Now you are students of literature. You know that Hamlet's main flaw was that he could not decide, that he kept on postponing, he procrastinated. So Prufrock is reminded of Hamlet when he cannot act. He says, I am not Prince Hamlet. I was not meant to be Prince Hamlet. Prince Hamlet lived in another day and age, and his situation was far above mine can ever be. I'm an ordinary human being. He was a prince. So I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times, indeed, almost ridiculous, almost at times, the fool. So he compares himself to Prince Hamlet and says, I cannot put myself in that position. I'm not Hamlet, but I am one of his lowly subjects, an attendant lord, those lords who were in Hamlet's company and who were supposed to watch over him and guard him and see that he did not get into danger at all. So he's like an attendant lord who will have a small role to play, but is not Prince Hamlet, because Prince Hamlet had a major role to play. He was the central protagonist. So he takes the image of the lords further and he says that I can advise the lord, but I am not the Lord himself. I'm very politic, I'm very cautious, and I'm very meticulous. So I have various features in myself, and these features he underlines. He says, I'm politic, that is, I'm very diplomatic, I'm cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. If he were not a bit obtuse, he would probably have been in place of Hamlet. So almost at times the fool, he keeps on changing his role depending on the situation. His role changes, and then all of a sudden he is reminded, I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. So he says, whenever I think about these things, the one thought that predominates is approaching age. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. If I am fashionable, if I dress in the latest manner, then I can perhaps become young again. That's how Prufrock looks at it, but that's not how we see it. We know that age will tell, that a man who's 20 years old cannot adopt the fashion of, let's say, a 13-year-old. A person who is 55, 60 years of age, my age perhaps, such a person cannot wear the colors and the fashions that a younger individual of, let's say, 15, 16 or 20 years is doing. So he says, no matter how many attempts I make, the thought is always there that I am trying to hide the bald spot, and I'm trying to present a different persona here. So he thinks that if he changes his clothes, he will look younger. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me, because I'm nobody special. Even the mermaids will not sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves. I've seen the mermaids. Now here is where you sort of start doubting Eliot's narrative as to whether it is true or not, because he says, I have seen the mermaids, and they sing to each other. And they do it when they are combing the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black. So when the water is really churned up, that is when I see mermaids. And he says, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. So everything is sort of building up on appearances, on the confusion in the minds of the reader as well as in the mind of the speaker. So these seagulls are referred to as mermaids. And he says that I keep on hearing their voices, the sound of their voices, until daybreak. And when day breaks, that is when all these nocturnal creatures, they disappear into their own holes or into their own houses. Just to sum up quickly what we've done in Prufrock, before we go on to the poem by Maya Angelou. Prufrock is a poem that has been written in the background of the uncertainty and the confusion in the minds of Americans regarding the situation in the world. As long as the war was in Europe, Americans felt very safe. But when American soldiers were sent to fight, the American nation rose up and started to realize that this was closer than what they had thought. And so when they saw American soldiers coming back, wounded American soldiers dying, they felt that all that they had been brought up to believe had been shattered, perhaps, and there was no more certainty anymore. So there are a lot of questions in the mind of the central protagonist of this poem, that is J. Alfred Prufrock. This is supposed to be a love song, but you know, a love song is something that is very soft. It's used to quote your beloved. It's used to make your beloved fall in love with you. But this love song is very different because Eliot has discussed world issues here. Eliot, amongst other issues, has discussed the fact that the world of today is a very materialistic world, and in this world people care about appearances. They don't care about they don't care to know about the actual reality, the ground reality. They are content to live in a fool's paradise and to think that everything is wonderful. But there are questions in the mind of Prufrock, and the one question that is uppermost in his mind is the fact that he's getting towards middle age, and that he's going to die. So the concept in those days was that if you grew to middle age and then you passed on to old age, you were closer to death. It's not like these days where you see 2 years old or newborn babies dying because of some disease or another. He says, I've talked to many women. I have seen a lot happening, and yet I live in a kind of dream world, in a state between waking and sleeping, because of so much that is happening around me. It's almost as if I am drowning in that sea of information. And this is the point at which Prufrock or T.S. Eliot leaves us. And he leaves a lot of open-ended questions that we can answer, because this is not a poem which is an instructional poem or a didactic poem. This is a poem which lays bare what American society is like. It does not tell you how it should be fixed. Okay? Now, we'll go on to the next poem, and this is Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. Now, Maya Angelou is one of those African-American poets and writers who became very famous because of the issues that they were bringing up. She was a part of the Harlem Renaissance. She was a part of the civil rights movement. And so her poetry is very uplifting. And when I read it out to you, you'll realize how easy it is to understand it and to apply it to your own situation. So Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Now, the beauty of this poem is that it is very, very encouraging and uplifting. And particularly when you compare it with the poem that we've just been doing, that is the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, there's a marked difference in the tone. Prufrock is chaos and confusion, uncertainty, unhappiness. Maya Angelou's poem is full of happiness. It's full of it's full of a lot of confidence that Maya Angelou has. So she says, you may write me down in history. You may, and here she's talking about blacks in particular and black women specifically. So she says, you may write me down in history. You may ignore my existence in history. But I will still rise because you are trying to suppress me. You are lying. She talks about bitter, twisted lies. You're lying. But I shall tell the truth. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. So there is that confidence, there is that feeling that she wants to be uplifted. So you see, she makes the most of a bad situation. She says, you may trod me down in the dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. You know, even if you stamp on me, I will still rise. I will still get up. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? So it says, you know, you're jealous of me. You want me to be humble. You want me to be submissive, but I'm not. I ask questions. I challenge you. I am an intelligent woman. So the first line here, does my sassiness upset you? Says, you know, when I ask a question, you say stop being sassy. But that is because the problem is with you, not with me. I speak with confidence because I have confidence. You think that confidence is the prerogative of the rich. It is not. I am confident because I'm an intelligent human being. So when she says, does my sassiness upset you? And then a little further on she says, because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. She's referring to the fact that men characterize a woman's nature and temperament by her appearance and by the money and position that she has. But he says, I don't need all that. I don't need oil wells pumping in my living room to be confident. I am confident because I'm an intelligent woman. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. So there's no way you can put Maya Angelou down. And you know, Maya Angelou is one of those remarkable personalities. She's still alive. She's still writing. She gives performances also. As wonderful to watch her. She has so much positive energy. She has such a positive viewpoint to contribute. And she knows that what the men would like is for her to be submissive, for her to do whatever they want her to do, not what she wants to do. But she says, I shall still rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. So he says, you know, you men wanted to see me broken. You wanted to see me submissive. Because when you chained my body, you thought you had chained my mind also. But that's not so. I am confident, I am intelligent, and I do not bow before anyone, be it man or woman. You wanted me to be totally broken down. And now when I stand up in front of you and I ask questions, you are offended. So it says, do not be offended, because I laugh. I laugh not because I have gold mines in my backyard, not because I have a lot of money. I laugh because I have confidence. I laugh because I live. I laugh because I'm intelligent. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. So she says, no matter how much you try to suppress me, no matter how much you try to undermine my confidence, I will not be suppressed. I will rise. I am like air. I am like dust. I am light because I'm intelligent. I am light because I'm independent. I am a thinking woman. I'm a feeling woman. And you cannot suppress me. You cannot kill me. Because she says, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? So Maya Angelou is a very, very open woman. She's very frank. She has been through a lot. She was discriminated against, and yet she has managed to rise. She has managed to make a success of her life. And now when she gives her performances, she talks about the time in her childhood when she was made to feel like dirt, when she was made to feel that she was a lower creature than the men, and particularly the white people around her. But she says, no more am I going to be suppressed. Now I have the confidence to stand up and face you. Now I have the confidence to question you and to demand my rights. Now I have privileges and I enjoy my privileges, and I deny you my person. So she says, when I'm frank, and it's because I'm confident. I know that I am an intelligent woman, and I know that my intelligence will be recognized no matter how much the world around may try to suppress me. I will not be suppressed. I will not be trodden down. So a lot of hope is given by the poet in this poem. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Now this is a reference, of course, to the civil rights movement and the fact that the African Americans were discriminated against to the extent that they were not allowed to use the same facilities. They were considered lesser creatures. And you all know the fact that they came to the United States as slaves. But the present day generations are not slaves. They are free people. They have confidence, they have education, they have money. But the best thing that they have is this hope that things will not stay the same, that they will not always be downtrodden. Of course, now you have President Obama, who is also black, and the African Americans take a lot of pride in the fact that they have a black president. So this is something that that comes as a surprise to many people, that a black woman should have the confidence and should have the ability not only to hold intelligent discussions and to keep people mesmerized with the sound of her voice, but to defy them to their face, to say, I will not do this and I will do this. to have that ability to have reached the position where you can dictate your terms, it's a long journey from the time when Africans were brought as slaves to the continent of the Americas, and they were chained like animals, they were bought and sold like animals, and they were not given basic human rights. Now she says, I can challenge you, not just men in general, but white men and white women in particular. I can challenge you and I can demand my rights. I enjoy my privileges and no one can put me down anymore. No one can say you are a lesser creature or you are not as good as the white. So there's a lot of confidence in this poem, and it's one of my favorites because of this message of hope. And this is a message of hope not just to African American people, but it's a hope for marginalized people anywhere in the world, anywhere in history. It offers hope to people who are downtrodden, whether they are white or black or yellow or red. It offers hope and sustenance to humanity in general, to mankind throughout the world. She says that I have a past that's rooted in pain, and of course this is a reference to slavery times. It's a reference to time when blacks were persecuted. So she says that my past is rooted in pain. My past is in a small hut, the hut of a slave on the plantation or working inside the house or in the factory. But my present is very different. I no longer live in a small hut. I have people who are living in the White House. There are people who are contributing to society, and they are treated equal. So if I am black, I'm a black ocean. An ocean that will leap and that will wipe out everything else. Welling and swelling I bear in the tide. So I'm like an ocean, and the tide comes in, the tide goes out. And when the tide goes out, it leaves behind debris. When it comes in, it brings present, it brings messages of hope. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Beautiful words, beautiful poem. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear. You know, this poem is a very important poem in the sense that there's a whole history behind it. And she's talking about the times when Africans were brought as slaves. They were treated atrociously, subhuman living conditions they were given. They were given terrible food. There was no hygiene on board the ships where they were brought in. And you know that even on the ships they were kept chained, and once a week or once a month in that long passage across from the African continent, they would be taken out and they would be hosed down with water, and they would be told to jump up and down and to get exercise, because when they were kept chained together and put in positions where they were lying in the hold of the ship, you know, this is how they were made to lie in the ships. because they wanted to bring in the maximum number of slaves and put them in the minimum amount of space. So they were lying down, and sometimes the heads of one person would be between the legs of another. So very closely packed and subhuman living conditions. So when she says that I leave behind nights of terror and fear, it's that journey that she's referring to. It's the years and years that they spent as slaves on plantations and working in the factories. Says now the daybreak is beautiful because I am free, I am confident, and because no one can enslave me anymore. My ancestors have given me so much confidence that I dream now. I can hope. I am not like the slaves who could neither dream nor hope. I am living in this present moment, and therefore I have the ability to stand up and face all those people who would like to tread me down, all those people who would like to suppress me, all those people who would take away my liberty. I can defy them, I can stand up to them and say that this will not happen anymore. I rise, I rise, I rise. So just before we wind up for today, let me quickly go over this poem by Maya Angelou, which gives us such a message of hope. This poem, that is titled Still I Rise, has a background of fear and terror, poverty and hunger, and most of all, it has a background of suppression. And this suppression Maya Angelou refers to again and again in her poem, when she says that you have ill-treated me, you have taken my freedom away from me, you have taken my confidence away from me, my family, the right to live. Because when these Africans were brought as slaves, they were treated like animals, not as human beings who have self-respect, but as animals who could be bought and sold whenever the owner wanted to. If the owner wanted to punish one particular person, he would just sell that person, and they were not allowed to marry, they were not allowed to have children. Whatever children were born were not the property of the parents. They did not belong to the parents, but they were the property of the owner or of the master, and they could be sold off whenever and wherever the master wanted. So the background to the poem is that of slavery. It is the transportation across the seas. It is the way they were put to auction. It is the way their bodies were examined, like you examine an animal that you are buying for sacrifice. It's that kind of conditions that they were subjected to, except that with the animal that you sacrifice, the order or the instructions are that you keep the animal well fed. Here it was exactly the opposite. They were not given food, and what food they were given was not good quality. They had no freedom. They had to do whatever the master wanted, whether they liked it or not, whether they were ill or in good health. They had to abide by whatever the master wanted. So when Maya Angelou repeats this line again and again, still I'll rise, and at the end of the poem when she says I rise, I rise, I rise, she is reinforcing the fact that the African Americans are a free people now. They no longer have to do what their masters want or what other people want. And she, most of all, is a free woman who can not only confront her oppressors, but she can also demand her rights. She can enjoy her privileges. And so this poem brings a message of hope, and it's not just a message of hope for African Americans or for one community, but it is a message of hope for the entire world, for all of humanity, all of mankind. Wherever there is persecution, wherever there is the desire to torment and oppress a group of people or a single individual even, there will be people who will bring up this poem, and the poem each time that they read will give a message of hope, will give a message of continuation. And this is a poem that Maya Angelou has written in order to not just bring back the tales of horror that were perpetrated on the African slaves, but also to show human beings in general and marginalized people in particular that if there is the will to be free, if there is a will to attain a better station in life, then the effort will be put into it, and that effort will be rewarded. So it brings a lot of hope for mankind in general, that things do not stay the same. If you have the will to rise, then the effort that is made is rewarded. And just as African Americans today are free and equal, in the same way, people who are oppressed or marginalized throughout the world can, through their own efforts, not just gain freedom, but also gain supremacy. Thank you for being very patient. Allah Hafiz.